The game is completely different than the one you entered into when you started out, in quotes, as a bookkeeper. The world's a completely different place for you today. And tomorrow it's even going to be that much more different, because its intelligent systems are determined to take over every mechanical role that every human being has in the work that they do, as robots build cars, as computers drive them. What do you think is going to happen in your business? Welcome to the 21st century.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to another episode of The Successful Bookkeeper. I'm Michael Palmer, your host, and I am super excited about today's guest. He is a true giant in the universe of entrepreneurship. Inc. magazine calls him the world's #1 small business guru. He's the author of the mega bestseller, The E-Myth Revisited, and 5 other E-Myth books concerning small business and entrepreneurship. He's also written 14 industry-specific E-Myth books, including the E-Myth Bookkeeper, which is co-written with Pure Bookkeeping co-founders Debbie Roberts and Peter Cook. Thanks to this gentleman's iconic work, he has impacted the lives of millions of individuals and hundreds of thousands of companies worldwide over 40 years. It is with great pleasure I welcome Michael E. Gerber to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. Michael, it's great to have you.
Well, it's wonderful to be here and delightful to speak with you, Michael. And we spoke together, was it back in, when was that, 2013? 2013, my goodness, time flies. And we had a wonderful conversation then, and certainly we have reason to have a wonderful conversation now, given the book, the E-Myth Bookkeeper, and given your stunning book, which I just wrote a testimonial for because I believe it's truly remarkable.
Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate it. And it's a little bit of goosebumps, I have to say, because, listen, I owned a small business with my mother. It was Coffee on Kelly, a little bistro. And when we built that business at the beginning, I was lucky enough to read E-Myth Revisited. And went through it, and I'm like, this is it. I got my mother to listen to you on audio. When she was at the coffee shop, she was listening away, and we implemented your philosophies into that business. And it changed my mother's life in terms of making that business workable, profitable, and a pure joy to work in. And so sure, her business grew like a weed as a result of that. So I have a really big place in my heart for your philosophies. And
that's lovely.
And I think that's why I'm attracted to the work that you do, and I've been following you ever since I found you.
Well, that's super. Is your mom still with us?
Yes, she is, and she exited out of the business. She did really well with the business, and now she is retired and living her life and enjoying life.
How super! Well, give her my love, please.
I will, absolutely. I'm sure she's listening. She will be, anyways. So enough about that. And I know they always say we gotta share, but I just had to share that with you, Michael. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. You know, people do share those stories with me, and there are countless stories just like that. But many, many, many don't. And I'll show up at an event perhaps and speak, and somebody will come up after the speech and say, Michael, you just completely changed my life, and blah, blah. And they start to tell me the story. And I said, well, how long ago did that happen? He said, 12 years ago or 14 years ago. I said, how come you never wrote me? He said, well, we just didn't think you'd care. I mean, can you imagine that? We just didn't think you'd care. when you've had such a profound impact, just as you've told me about your mom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm reminded that we don't thank the people who've made the big differences in our life enough.
Yeah, well, but it's not even the thank you that I miss. What people perhaps don't understand is that inspiration is as important to me as it is to anybody on the street. I mean, everything that I've ever done is a product of inspiration. But as you grow and as you grow older, I just passed my 80th birthday, those experiences are treasured beyond anything that I can ever imagine treasuring, because people are saying, look what you helped me do. Look what you helped me do. And you feel it when they say it, because it's so true. Look what you helped me to do. And Michael, you're doing the very same thing with all of the bookkeepers you're working with.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I don't think I've actually thought of it that way. Is that it's a further investment in the inspiration of you back to me. It's a kind of a giving of and receiving of energy, which I think is and I think that's a lot of what I've noticed. The work that you've done later on after E-Myth and then E-Myth Revisited is this whole concept of the energy and the spirit that we have as entrepreneurs. And really obviously I wanted to have you on the podcast. You were the first person I thought of to have on the Successful Bookkeeper podcast, and, making sure that people know about your work and can access the philosophies, because really you've unlocked that for so many people. And as we're talking about, I'm just thinking, boy, if people started to thank you, you'd need to read a lot of emails. You'd have to open up. You'd be like Santa Claus. You'd have to open up. You'd have to have a whole team of elves opening letters based on the amount of people that you've impacted.
Yeah, but that's cool.
That'd be totally cool.
Fine.
Absolutely. I'll apply for one of those elf positions. There you go.
You got it.
Awesome.
So what would you like to ask me today?
You have an extraordinary history, so helping businesses, and I'd like to just share a little bit of that little bit of that journey to becoming one of the world's most respected authorities on small business.
Well, it's really very interesting in one sense. All of my life, it's been looking for what is called the Holy Grail, but not so sacred. But constantly asking the question, why am I here? Why am I here? What am I meant to be doing? Why aren't I doing it? What would it feel like if I were doing it? And that's been true all of my life. It's this constant question. And I went from doing just ordinary things, but having had an extraordinary impact from the people who I managed to bump into, from my saxophone teacher to my sales manager at Encyclopedia Americana, to the guy who taught me how to frame a house, and on and on and on. These people, for whatever reason, inspired me and taught me things that I just didn't know and would never have discovered had they not been so rigorous in their pursuit of them. So each of them were true believers in what they do. My saxophone teacher said, I only teach people who want to become the best saxophone players in the world. In order to do that, you got to practice. You got to practice what I tell you to practice. You got to practice how I tell you to practice. You got to practice how long I tell you to practice. And then you come up here once a week from Anaheim to Hollywood to get beat up for an hour. And then you go back and do it again. And that was the invitation to become taught how to play the saxophone when I was 11 years old. Mm. That was the first extraordinary experience. And he was the most torrential teacher anybody had ever had. I mean, this guy didn't quit. And the truth is, he didn't even like me. Meaning, he didn't like to teach kids. He taught pros, guys who played in the studios. He taught the very best of the best. So I had that experience. And that experience led me to the next experience and the next experience to the next experience. And as I went through that whole process, it wasn't until really in midlife that I was interested in business at all. And that's when a very close friend of mine, a guy who married my younger sister, my brother-in-law, Ace, asked me to come visit one of his high-tech companies, clients, because he couldn't convert leads that Ace's ad agency was creating for him into sales. And I looked at Ace and I said, Ace, I don't know anything about high tech and I don't know anything about business, so how can I help him? And Ace said, you know more than you think you do. Just come visit with the man. And that was the experience I had in which the E-Myth was actually born. I sat with that guy, the CEO of that company. He asked me, what do you know about my business? Nothing. What do you know about my product? Less than that. How can you possibly help me? I haven't a clue, but Ace thinks I can. Ace took off for an hour, so we're stuck with each other. Let's find out. And I just began to ask him questions. And as I began to ask questions, I just listened to the answers. And as I listened to the answers, I began to realize this guy had a serious problem. And what I suddenly understood is that his serious problem was he didn't understand what I had learned, and that is that selling is a system. Now, I don't know why I never associated that knowing, that truth, with business. For some reason, I just never thought about the business of it. I just thought about the work of it, that selling is a system. And I told him that selling is a system. Your problem comes from the fact that you haven't truly created a system for doing what you do. And that's why you're unable to convert the leads that Ace has created for you. First of all, the leads that he's created for you haven't been created for the sales process that must follow those leads. They've been created for the product you're selling. And so what you need to do is think about the process, which is really only a system over time, and you'll begin to see that. Heck, a kid could sell your product with the right system. And that's when the whole thing was triggered. He said to me, well, do you know how to do that? And my answer was, well, sure. Anybody can figure that out. And he said, well, I can't. Why don't you do it? So when Ace picked me up, he asked me what happened. I said, Bob just hired me. He said, what do you mean? He hired me as a consultant, a sales consultant, to invent a selling system for him so he can convert the leads that you're going to be creating for him. And Ace was astonished because he said, yeah, but you don't know anything about his product. You don't know anything. And Ace, that's what I told you before we started this process. And that was the beginning of E-Myth.
Wow.
So that was the beginning of E-Myth. I began to work with Bob on Bob's business, not in Bob's business, to invent the selling system that would eventually turn Bob's business completely around, but also turned Ace's advertising agency completely around. Because suddenly Ace saw something that he'd never seen before. And then another client, and then another client, and then another client. And in the process of doing that, began to realize this is universal. This isn't just about high tech, or wasn't about furniture, it wasn't about a restaurant, it was about everything. It was true for every single client Ace had, and Ace never saw it, and his clients never saw it. And I came to the realization that, in fact, I just discovered something that was rare. And so I decided to go off on my own to do just that. And that was the beginning of all of it.
I do remember the story from your books, but hearing it firsthand, certainly a few things. It's amazing just how one's life unfolds, and you see something you've never seen before. It's an epiphany or an awakening to something, but as well, just the story has so much message in the story around building a system-dependent business and this concept of working on your business. Super valuable.
Thank you. Yes.
And I think that leads to the great next question here, which is, so many businesses don't have systems and haven't implemented these philosophies. And so, in your opinion, what do you think the major barriers are that prevent people from implementing your philosophies?
Well, the one and only obstacle to implementing that mindset or that philosophy is the absence of the entrepreneur, the creator, the Imagineer, as Walt Disney calls an entrepreneur, calls that individual who sees through different eyes what's waiting to be seen but is missing for most people. And it's that bookkeepers are so hopelessly caught up in doing it. They don't think about the business of it. They think about the work of it. And so the E-Myth is the entrepreneurial myth, which is the core of everything I just shared with you. What I discovered in every one of those small businesses way back then at the very beginning, Bob and Judy and Jim and Marilyn and so forth and so on, is that they weren't entrepreneurs. They were technicians suffering from an entrepreneurial seizure, meaning they went out on their own because they knew how to do the work. And they decided they're going to do the work on their own for themselves so they can become their own boss and take home all the money. And only after some period of time begin to discover, wait a minute, something's wrong here. What is it? Well, what they presume it to be is that they've got too much work to do and they can't find good people to do that work. But in reality, it is not that they have too much work to do or that they can't find and keep good people to do that work. It's that they don't understand the work from the top down. They only do the work from the bottom up. And because they do the work from the bottom up, they're caught up in this morass. It's the old forest for the trees syndrome. And so every single bookkeeper listening to us right now simply needs to understand that there's a completely new world waiting for them out there. And that world is so much more abundant than the world they're accustomed to. But it's not the world of a bookkeeper. It's a world of a bookkeeping enterprise. And that bookkeeping enterprise is something stunningly, remarkably different than simply doing it, busy, as I've spoken about in all of my E-Myth books.
Absolutely bang on. And it just leads us to the next question, which is, in my head was, how do we interrupt? How do we interrupt that? And you started to allude to that there's something. First of all, it's exciting because there's something beyond the morass, beyond the doing it, this enterprise that you're speaking of. And let's talk a little bit about the book you wrote with Debbie Roberts and Peter Cook called E-Myth Bookkeeper. And, what can bookkeepers expect? What kind of journey are they going to go on with you, Debbie and Peter?
Well, the wonderful truth about it is when you ask, what can you do to, et cetera, and so forth, you've already done it. With the publication of the E-Myth Bookkeeper, why most bookkeeping businesses don't work and what to do about it. With the publication of your new book, telling the story of Debbie and what she and Peter went through the process of inventing a great company rather than a great job. Once you have done that, then it's simply a question of continually taking every bookkeeper out here on the planet through that story, through that process. We did it at the very beginning, when E-Myth was the Michael Thomas Corporation. When I just left Ace and started a new business, I started it with a guy who Ace had brought in to replace me at his ad agency. And as the guy learned what I was doing, he asked me where I was going, and I said, well, I'm going to go start a business doing this. And he said, I'm going to go with you. So his name was Thomas. Yeah, Thomas said, I want to go poor Ace.
Poor Ace, I was thinking, yeah.
We blindsided him. Thomas said, I want to go with you.
Wow.
And he did. And we created the Michael Thomas Corporation. Now, what do you do to get a bookkeeper to pay attention? Well, at the Michael Thomas Corporation, we did a seminar. After we had many, many different ways, we went out in the street knocking on doors. We sold it for this, we sold it for that. We did this, we did that. But effectively, the most powerful thing we did way back then, and I'm talking about starting out in 1977, so this is a long time ago, we went down the street and invited people to a free seminar. Not just any people, owners only. And we invited them to a seminar, and the seminar was called Key Frustrations in a Small and Growing Business and What to Do About Them. And in that seminar, which I created and I actually performed until we replaced me with all the people who did the seminar instead of Michael Gerber, in that seminar, I would say, welcome to Key Frustrations in a Small and Growing Business and What to Do About Them. I'm Michael E. Gerber. I'm the co-founder of Michael Thomas Corporation. We call ourselves a business development firm. And when you think of business development, you typically think of sales. The business development guy in a company is the sales guy. He's the one who gets new business. But when we speak about business development, we speak about it literally. It's the development of a business. And what we've discovered is truly, truly remarkable, that most people who own and operate their own business have no idea why they experience the frustrations they've got. They think it's because they can't find good enough people. They think it's because they don't have enough capital. They think because of the competition. They think about this and they think about that. And all of the reasons that we've ever been given, all the frustrations everybody experiences. But here, right now, at the outset of this seminar, I want to tell you that, in fact, none of those frustrations matter one bit, because they're not the problem. They're only the result of the problem. The problem is, and will always be, and has always been, you, the people sitting in this room. You're the problem. You're the reason you're experiencing your frustrations. And what I'm going to do is share with you the price you're paying for it and how to make the difference. And that started the seminar. So you understand, the only way you will get a bookkeeper, a chiropractor, a heart surgeon, a software guy or a hardware guy, any human being on earth who owns his or her own small business, the only way you'll get their attention is to hit them right between the eyes with the truth of it. And that's what we did. That's why I call myself the chief aggravator. Because you've got to shock people into awareness that, in fact, every single bookkeeper on the planet out there independently in business, what they call in business but isn't really a business at all, it's a job, every single one of them need to be woken up. And that's what the book will do a little bit of, and that's what your book will do a little bit of, but got to be an emotional awakening. They've got to come to realize the price they're paying for doing it, for doing the job they do so dutifully, for keeping busy doing the job. They do so dutifully. You've got to wake them up to understand the price they're paying for that. That it's a completely different world right there, right where they are, and they don't see it at all. So your job, our job, is to get them to see it. My new book, which will be published, knock on wood, in December of 2016, not that far from
That's
now,
close.
is
Yeah.
called Beyond the E-Myth, the evolution of an enterprise from a company of one to a company of 1,000. And essentially what I'm saying to every single human being who believes they want to own their own business or already does own their own business, that there's one absolutely clear outcome. And that's the outcome your mom experienced. Had she not gone to work on her little restaurant, it was a restaurant, right?
That's right. Little bistro. You got it.
Yeah, little bistro. Had she not gone to work on that little bistro, to turnkey that little bistro, so she could manage that little bistro to a degree that she had never been able to manage it before, had she not done that, she would have never been able to sell it the way she had. And so everybody, you, I, every single one of us in business have to be entrained to think about our exit strategy. A really brilliant guy in Australia who wrote a book on exit strategies. And I had a conversation just a little bit ago. And he tells a story in his book about how he had built a small business, he and his partners, and they went out to get a valuation of the business, what it was today. The evaluation came back, it was $147,000. That's what it was worth today. He looked at the valuation and said, we've just spent 5 years of our life building this thing, and you're telling me it's only worth $147,000? But remarkably, they then sold that company only about 18 months later for $7,800,000 and some odd thousand.
Wow, remarkable.
Now, what in the world was the difference between the professional valuation and the price the guy who bought it was willing to pay for it? The difference was the difference in their strategy, meaning they thought in a completely different way when they went out to position their company to the prospective buyer. And that positioning made all the difference. I'm saying that's true for every single bookkeeper you have, every single individual who owns a small company you've ever met. That, in fact, it's that strategy, going to work on it. But in this case, going to work on it rigorously in a completely different way than most people would tell you. And that's what our focus is now. Preparing your company for sale. Preparing your company for sale. Preparing your company for sale. And the way you think that is the way you do that. And the way you do that makes all the difference in the world.
I'm sure that your book is going to be bought by every single listener on this podcast because it is, it's brilliant. And what a great story. And I'll be interested to read the book that you're talking about from Australia and look forward to your upcoming book.
You got it.
And it's interesting, Michael, too, because, one of the great books that was written, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think the last secret, or it's not a secret, it's the habit, the seventh habit is think with the end in mind.
Yep.
And so this is
well, but obvious. It's so obvious, isn't it? The minute somebody says the obvious, you begin to see the obvious. The reality is that obvious was there to see before anybody ever identified it as one of the 7 whatevers.
You got it. And I think what's interesting is how so many businesses, like you say, they're in their seizure, doing it. They just live maybe in a fantasy about the possibility of, well, I'm just going to sell this and it's worth, how do they even evaluate or value what it's worth? It's certainly not measured on their time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears. And so the impact I think you're going to have, and what this impact that this even conversation will have on our listeners, is the value of that time to just think about selling the business and what you want to sell it for, and becoming an expert and doing your research and becoming educated around how you can maximize the sale of your business. Think about the return on that investment of time. 18 months. 18 months, They went from, what was it, 140
something to 7 million.
To 7 million. And what was it, like a thought of an hour to think, we need to think about this differently? I mean, that's a pretty darn good ROI.
Very, very cool. Well, they came to the realization that who the buyer was critical. And we all know about the strategic buyer. The buyer is critical because the value is created by the buyer in the buyer's mind, because the seller has built the product called his business with that buyer in mind. So suddenly this business became extremely valuable to a buyer whose own business was going to be affected positively by the acquisition of that business. So the question becomes then, so who is going to value from the acquisition of your company? And what's the value add that the acquisition of your company is going to provide to their company? And one of the key decision makers in that is, does it have the ability to scale? So if your company hasn't the ability to scale, that means to grow, to replicate, like McDonald's. If your company doesn't have the ability to scale, then it doesn't have that great value perceived by the potential acquisition partner or acquirer of your company. It's got to be able to scale. You've got to be able to replicate it. It can't depend upon you. Can't depend upon Michael Palmer. Can't depend on Michael Gerber. Can't depend upon any of the people, Deborah or whatever. It can't depend upon you. It has to depend upon the system. This is how we do it here. Because once that's done, then it's scalable. 20 times, 50 times, 1,000 times, 200,000 times, 37,000 times like McDonald's did. So that's the power of that model, the turnkey model, that's so exquisite when it's applied in an industry, in a business, in a enterprise, in a job that is not ever thought to be like that. You can't do that here because so dependent upon our people, and our people are experts, and blah, 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 blah. And that's always the inhibitor. That's always the obstacle to being able to think this way. Yeah, you can't do that here. Yeah, but we're different. Yeah, but our market is more sophisticated. Yeah, but, and on and on and on and on. And I'm saying that's the great opportunity. Once you can see that obstacle, to simply step around it and say, yes, but what if we could? Because if we could, can you see the incredible differentiation that's created between what we do and what everybody else does?
It's fantastic, Michael. I mean, I've got all sorts of thoughts are going through my head on multiple levels, as I'm not surprised, just in terms of my own business and the work that I do. And it's fantastic. And I've got a couple more questions, and then I want to talk about the course, which I'm a program that you've recently launched that I'm taking now, and I want you to share about that program. But before that, I think it's an interesting. Bookkeepers are in an interesting position, and I think there's an opportunity that gets missed a little bit here for them, and that is they are small business owners, and they work for small business owners in a very intimate, a very important component of their business. And I'm trying to think what you called it in E-Myth Mastery is the financial leader.
Yeah, the
right?
financial leader.
The financial leader is that they have an opportunity to be pushing forward this whole concept of system for their customers and helping them spur on the financial leader, which increases their value in the eyes of the owner and makes a difference for the businesses and the employees that work for those businesses. And so I just want your take on that.
Well, let me give you my take on that. Let me tell you the obstacle, the barrier to what you've just described, which also obviously is the positioning for the opportunity that you've just described. A bookkeeper is never thought of as a leader. A bookkeeper in many businesses isn't even thought of as important. A bookkeeper just does a job they've got to get done. In fact, the vast majority of small business owners, where most bookkeepers work, don't even pay attention to the books, meaning the output of the bookkeeper. So the books, the financial information, the income statement, whatever, aren't thought to be by, unfortunately, the vast majority of small business owners, key to the decision-making that they do. In short, they don't even value the information. So if they don't value the information because they've never utilized the information for truly operating their business in a more effective manner, then how can they possibly value the person who brings them that information? The only thing every bookkeeper will experience is if they don't get the books done on time, if the owner can't complete his tax return on time because the bookkeeper failed in some way to fulfill their responsibility, then the bookkeeper gets attention. Otherwise, the bookkeeper doesn't get attention at all. Now, the other piece of that puzzle is that because most bookkeepers aren't leaders, they've never learned about leadership. And so they don't perform a leadership role in relationship with their clients. And that calls for a whole slug of repositioning. Repositioning in the mind of the bookkeeper, repositioning in the mind of the small business owner. And that's what we were talking about when I talked about key frustrations in the small and growing business. If I were speaking to bookkeepers at that seminar, meaning bookkeepers who own their own bookkeeping practice, I would be saying identically the very same thing I'm saying to you right now. How does it feel to be invisible? You follow me?
Oh, Michael, you know, just to the T. Yeah, and it's I think you unpacked that so well to help our listeners get what they're up against. And really, anyone who's listening to this really is at a precipice of extreme change in their industry and their business. When they get that, what you just said, they will change their enterprise, their business, their incomes forever.
Absolutely. But you understand the challenge.
Massive challenge here.
Michael.
We have a massive challenge. This is not an individual issue. This is an industry, global industry issue that they're up against.
You got it.
Yes.
You got it. And that's the opportunity. See, you have the opportunity to completely alter that reality. But it's a slugfest because it comes with a shift of consciousness being called for that most people simply can't wake up long enough to experience. So you become, in my terms, the chief aggravator in your industry. You become the one who's telling the story, which essentially is saying, guys, this whole thing has changed. The game is different. The game is completely different than the one you entered into when you started out, in quotes, as a bookkeeper. The world's a completely different place for you today. And tomorrow it's even going to be that much more different, because its intelligent systems are determined to take over every mechanical role that every human being has in the work that they do, as robots build cars, as computers drive them. What do you think is going to happen in your business? Welcome to the 21st century.
You better believe it. Wow.
And so I'm simply saying that that's your message, that's your story. And it's not just to become a better technician, meaning to work better. It's not that. It's completely relate to the function that's being performed and the impact that it will have, should have, could have on the people who depend upon them. So you need to become consumer-centric, not work-centric. And consumer-centric means that you must take on the role of the chief aggravator with your small business client. Software is doing what you accustomed yourself to do. Now, how do you then lead the use of that to better inform a business owner about the decisions he or she has to make? So you see, we need to become all more strategic. Every bookkeeper on the planet needs to become more strategic, needs to become a financial, operational leader who brings an awareness, a consciousness of decision-making to the operation of a small company, if that company is going to survive, let alone if that company is going to thrive. So anybody can pick up that mantle. You understand that, Michael?
I do.
It's just there to be had. I mean, it's just waiting to be had. Anybody can pick up that mantle. But once that mantle is picked up, it's going to require an enormous shift in consciousness of the person who does that. And when I speak of consciousness, I mean just that, human consciousness, awareness, understanding, relatedness.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I think there's some big shoes to fill in terms of taking that mantle and taking forth and being that leader. And I think the work that we're doing, I mean, that's what this podcast is all about, is to inspire that in our listeners to do that. And
That's cool.
It's such an honorable role to play, and there's so much opportunity for the business owners and the families of the employees that work for those businesses.
For everyone who listens, it's just an extreme opportunity. For everyone who doesn't, it's a tragedy.
It's absolutely bang on. So, Michael, This is officially our longest podcast, and I am so grateful for your generosity of your time. And I know that, with the years of work that you've done, we could probably go for hours and hours. Let's talk about how people can get more of you and more of the work that you're doing and this message that you have. And I think, and talk about the course. I know you've got that new book coming out. We're going to have a link to that. We're going to make sure that's on our website for people to get quick access to. But tell us about the course. I've begun to take the course. Tell us about it and why you started it and what people can expect to get from it.
Well, the course is the next step. It's taking what I've done, all the work I've done, and condensing it into a very clear process. In the E-Myth work that we have done, we've taught people how to do just an immense number of things. And I came to this realization. I mean, maybe it's the fact that I just turned 80. I just came to this realization. I've got to cut through the chaff. I've got to get right down to the heart of it. I've got to truly provide a small business owner with a path that in fact can be implemented by anyone, must be implemented by anyone, with the ultimate outcome being the sale of my company. And so we identified that path. And then I wrote the script for the course, which became a video 3.5 hours long, designed to do two things: to inspire any bookkeeper right now listening to us, and to teach any bookkeeper listening to us right now about the absolutely essential steps needed, step 1, step 2, et cetera, to build your company for sale. Now, I call it from a company of 1 to a company of 1,000 because effectively I'm saying we're not going to fix the company you've got, we're going to start it anew. So just imagine it being a skunk works where you're going to actually start something brand new and you're going to begin it from scratch. How would you do that? The course explains that process. The course is, in fact, and provides the tenets that are being communicated in the new book that I'll publish. But the course is an emotional journey through a process that absolutely is critical for you to go from where you are to where you never thought you would be. Step 1 is the dream. Step 2 is the vision. Step 3 is the purpose. Step 4 is the mission. Step 5 is the job. Step 6 is the practice. Step 7 is the business. Step 8 is the enterprise. I walk you through that entire process, starting out with the dreaming room, as I call it, a dream, a vision, a purpose, a mission. The true soul of an entrepreneur is a dreamer, a thinker, a storyteller, a leader. I need you to understand who those people are. They live within you. You just don't talk to them very much, because you're so busy doing it. So step over here, sit down with me in the course, and let me lead you through the process so you'll be able to see that it's actually that, a process. And a process is nothing other than a system over time. Let me walk you through it. Once you're done with that, then you can graduate from the course and enroll in the program. And the program is the step-by-step process of implementing the course right there in the company you own by completely transforming it. So that's good news. You don't have to fix your broken business. And I say broken business simply because they all are. And invent the new business that is going to prepare you for sale. And when I say that, understand, I know that nobody who owns a business even thinks about preparing for a sale. They're so busy thinking about income, they don't have the time or the intelligence to think about equity. So my role now is to get you to think about equity, the value of what you own, the asset you're going to create, rather than income, the earning that you're going to do between now and then. So the entirety of it, Michael, is to think about equity, not about income. While you're making a living, let's go over here and build what you're about to sell. And once you put on those two hats, the hat of the income seeker and the hat of the equity seeker, you understand the trick that's absolutely essential. You have to be able to do two things at once. And so that's what the course is. And the course is only $295. And all people have to do is say, Michael Palmer, I want to get the course. And anybody listening to you, just come into Michael Palmer and say, I want to get the course. And Michael, you'll then send us those names and we'll get the course to everybody you send to us.
Absolutely. And we'll
I want them to come through you, not directly to us. Because in this relationship, you're a colleague of ours, and we're a colleague of yours.
Oh, it's brilliant, Michael, and it's our pleasure to do it. And we'll definitely have the link and all the information that our listeners will need to get access to that. And I can say just from knowing and working with and being a partner of Debbie Roberts in Pure Bookkeeping. When Peter Cook handed her your book all those years ago, and she read it and she got it and she implemented it, she put on the income hat and she put on the equity hat and made very good money from her business, and then eventually exited the business at a very, very good amount of money that she had built all those years. And she was rewarded on both hats, which is what I think people need to be aware of and what they can get by the sounds of it from the course. And like I said, I've just begun to take the course, and I'm already enjoying your monologues. Michael, this has been extraordinary. I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, my delight, Michael, and thank you. And of course, we're going to have a deep, deep relationship in the years ahead. I've promised my wife that I'm going to live to 162, so I'm going to be busy, and we'll be busy together. I'm truly with both those hats in mind, the hat of the income creator and the hat of the equity creator, and something magical will occur. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So that's another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please go to the successfulbookkeeper.com/questions. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. And of course, you can get all of the things that we've talked about and links and information on how to get in touch with and work with all of Michael's work and see and read about all of his books at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Under the episodes, just search for Michael's episode, and you'll have all of that there. So thank you for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.